So we talked about a bunch of the different skill sets, you know, that the rising generation are going to learn. Would either of you mind sharing some examples of where you saw, or that, you know, what were the tools, what were the things that you, exercises that you helped put into place so that you could, you know, generate some of those things, something, you know, live, you know, with a family that worked?
So I'll jump in here. So one of the, this actually isn't a family example, but it's an exercise that I would do with a family, and it's something that's coming to my mind is, one time I did a presentation actually with a Girl Scout troop, and was introducing them to the idea of philanthropy. And one of the exercises I do is I have a bunch of photos I use. It's from a group. Bruce and I have both been trained by 2164. And they have these picture cards that they call legacy cards. And the idea is, you know, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. And it can really sort of set off something visceral, you know, when you see a picture. So I had the girls go through the pictures and identify some that might express something that they want to see happen in the world. And everybody in the group was, you know, able to find something that really spoke to helping other people. One girl in particular, though, had a little trouble with this, and she just found there was like a picture of a mansion, and that's what she picked out. And she couldn't express, you know, what it was, but she wanted that mansion. And so I walked her through, you know, well, that's a really nice house, you know, and if you want a house, don't you think there are others who want a house, who want shelter over their heads? So I kind of helped her to see that, well, she may already have shelter, and her vision for herself is a bigger, grander shelter. She also needed to realize there are people who walk around this world that don't have a home. They don't have a shelter, and they need that. And so that was a way to sort of take on and sort of help her reframe her thinking, to help her realize that there's a true need in this world for shelter for people. And so that's just an example of one exercise that I do with pretty much everybody, is to use these pictures to help verbalize the legacy and what individuals and families want to see created in this world.
Great, thank you. Bruce, in terms of families that you've worked with and you've watched the rising generation or the next generation start to grow and change, what were, you know, we talked about leadership before. Anything come to your mind in terms of a strong example of how that worked?
I have many, but I'll focus on one family. One of the things that we do with families, as I said earlier, in order to set this philanthropic table, is we set these ground rules about how we're going to treat each other, right? The other thing is we define the purpose. What is the purpose for this joint effort? Why are we doing this? Why are we taking all of our time and all of this money and coming together around a philanthropic table? And I have seen families where the number one purpose of their family philanthropic endeavor is to keep the family working together over generations, right? It's to help the family thrive over time and over distance and over challenges that happen. So I'm working with one family right now where one branch of the family is deeply religious and very conservative. The other branch of the family is the opposite. They're not religious and they're very liberal. So under normal circumstances, they really wouldn't have a lot to talk about because they didn't feel like they had a lot in common. But they formed a family foundation. It was started by the brother and sister of G1, and then there's the G2, and then there's now a rising G3 of little ones, but coming. And they decided that their first purpose of this whole effort is for the family to learn to work together, for the cousins to get to know each other, for the siblings to get along and to begin to make decisions together as future stewards of the family's wealth. And their secondary purpose was to make a difference in the world. But their primary purpose is to keep the family together. That's that question, what difference do we want to make for ourselves? Is their difference was they wanted to help the family thrive over the generations. So when we make decisions, when we work, when we sit at that philanthropic table, the first priority is how do we do this in a way that helps this family blend its values as opposed to be divided by its values and work together. And a classic example came up is that they wanted to fund some medical research. And there was a particular disease that the family is concerned about. And so they wanted to fund some medical research, but they discovered that the researchers were using stem cells from aborted fetuses. Well, that offended the religious side of the family. And so we worked together as a family to find a way to do that research without doing that. Because the purpose wasn't to do the research, that was the secondary purpose. The first purpose was to get the family to work together and to keep the family going together. So we solved the problem by being respectful of the family differences with the eye toward that family purpose of helping the family thrive over generations. And the medical research was funded, but it was funded in a way that didn't offend one part of the family's deeply held religious beliefs. So, I mean, that's just one of many examples that I could give of where this philanthropic table, setting a purpose, establishing ground rules, and ultimately having a shared mission can be a place for great healing, great growth, and great opportunity for families.
Yeah. I would throw in there, you know, we talked about this, and I don't know if it was Deborah that said this or Bruce, but there was a family that didn't have it wasn't like multi-million-dollar, you know, family foundation, but even doing this with small amounts of money, it doesn't take an awful lot of money to make this work, right? You know, you can teach, you know, a child that's 5 years old, you can have these conversations with and have an impact, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And it's the practice. I mean, all of these skills that we've been talking about can be learned even when you're dealing with a small pot of money. And I think, in fact, that was, you've reminded me that was the family that I was talking about. And I think while I was working with them, the younger generation actually proposed to the wealth generators to increase their pot of money that they would get to distribute. And they, you know, came up with their carefully crafted arguments of why this should happen. And it was, you know, there's just such passion around it. So the process can be, you know, maybe simplified to some degree, but it can be learned, you know, if you're giving away $100 or if you're giving away $100 million.
It's that taking the time to be purposeful with it, isn't it?
Right.
That's exactly right. You can have a philanthropic table with very little amounts of money, because all of this work and all of this journey isn't dependent upon the on the amount of money that you have to give away. One thought is that the word philanthropy, from which philanthropist is obviously derived, means philos. It comes from the Greek term philos anthropos. And philos anthropos is love of humanity. Doesn't mean you have to be Bill and Melinda Gates to love humanity, although they clearly do. But it's not about how much, but it's the process and the intentionality and the purposeful approach toward answering those two questions that we talked about that I think are the driver, not the amount of money that you have to give away.
Right. And I would also add that that this is an opportunity. I mean, Michael, you brought up this example of the soup kitchen, and I think I've seen multiple families that have done this, that this is also an opportunity not just to sit at a table and have the conversation, but to get out there and do be philanthropic by giving their time.
Right.
And, volunteering or giving their ties, being advocates for whatever cause that the family has taken on, and really spreading the message of how important that cause is. So there's other ways besides the money that all play into